France, October 8, 1918. A single man walks through the forest. Behind him, 132 German soldiers, armed, trained, alive. Following a Tennessee farmer they just tried to kill. No one commanded them to follow. They chose it. His hands still tremble. He left home a pacifist. He's about to return a legend. But not for the reason you'd expect. Because this story isn't about how one man overpowered 132 soldiers. It's about why 132 soldiers decided one man was worth surrendering to. So who is he? Alvin York grew up under a single rule. Miss the shot, the family goes hungry. 11 children, 1 rifle. The mountains of Tennessee. By 12 years old, York was the finest marksman in Fentress County. Not from practice, from necessity. A moving turkey at 200 yards, he'd drop it clean. He never missed the same target twice. But 2 years before the draft letter arrived, York stepped into a revival meeting. He entered one person. He emerged as somebody else entirely. The Bible left no room for interpretation. Thou shalt not kill. No qualifiers. No exceptions for wartime. No asterisk for patriotism. Just, thou shalt not kill. York held this truth the way he held gravity. Absolute. So when the draft notice came in 1917, York did something almost unheard of in his county. He refused. Filed for conscientious objector status. Denied. Filed a second time. Denied again. The third letter wasn't asking permission. York folded it, slid it into his pocket, walked to the field behind his house. He stood there a long while, staring at the mountains. Death didn't frighten him. What frightened him was returning changed. Sitting across from his mother, studying his own hands, knowing what they'd done. He reported for duty anyway. Somewhere on the crossing between Tennessee and France, he struck a bargain with God. He just wasn't certain God heard it. France, October 8, 1918. Before dawn, 17 men slipped through the forest without a word. York among them. Not leading, just a corporal. Following orders, doing his job. Trying not to let his mind drift back to Tennessee. Their mission: capture the Dolville Railroad. Sever German supply lines. Clean and simple on paper. They carry a map. The map is in French. Not one man in the patrol reads French. They push forward anyway, deeper into the forest. Farther from their own lines. Farther from anything familiar. The canopy thickens. Light drains from the air. The rumble of their own artillery fades to nothing behind them. Then, voices. German. Close. Far too close. They've stumbled straight into the center of a German camp. 1 frozen second. Nobody breathes. The Americans fire first. Germans scatter. The patrol sees a group of prisoners instantly, more than anticipated. For one heartbeat, it tastes like victory. Then the hillside tears apart. Machine guns above them, concealed in the tree line, pouring fire down into the valley where York's patrol stands exposed with their prisoners. No cover, no escape. In the first burst, 6 Americans collapse, dead before their bodies touch the earth. 3 more wounded. 9 out of 17 gone in under 10 seconds. York scans for someone to give orders. The sergeant, dead. The other sergeant, dead. The corporal, down. Every man ranked above York in the chain of command is either lifeless or bleeding out. No one remains. The machine guns keep hammering, and Alvin York, the pacifist farmer from Tennessee who pleaded not to be sent here, now holds command. The man who refused to kill is now the only man still on his feet. York doesn't freeze, doesn't pray, doesn't think about Tennessee or God or the bargain he whispered on the ship. No time for any of it. There's only the hillside overhead, the relentless chatter of machine guns, and 8 men still breathing who are staring at him, waiting for somebody to tell them what to do. He takes charge the only way he understands. No orders, no strategy, pure instinct. He tells the surviving men to guard the prisoners and keep their heads down. Then he turns toward the hill, toward the machine guns, toward the thing that just killed 6 of his friends in under 10 seconds. And he starts moving. Not charging, not sprinting. Moving the way a hunter stalks through the Tennessee mountains before first light, when the animals have no idea he exists. Low, slow, deliberate, using every chunk, every shadow, every crease in the terrain. His body executing what his mind never had to consciously process, because he'd done this 10,000 times before. Not in France, in Fentress County, before dawn, when the family needed meat and a miss meant an empty table. The Germans on that hill aren't scanning for him. They're watching the Americans below, waiting for the patrol to shatter and run. That's what happens when machine guns open up at close range. Men panic, they scatter, they fall back. It's not cowardice, it's biology. Every military unit in every war in recorded history has broken under surprise machine gun fire from elevated ground. York's patrol doesn't break, because York won't let them. He keeps pushing up that hill. And here's the detail most people have never heard, the detail that unlocks the entire story. York grew up hunting wild turkeys. Turkeys are not dumb animals. They're quick, hyper-alert, and they signal each other. Shoot the bird at the front of the flock. The rest explode in every direction. You bag one. Maybe 2 if you're lightning fast. Then the flock vanishes and you walk home empty-handed. So you never take the front bird first. You start from the back. Drop the last bird in the line. It falls quietly. The birds ahead don't see it, don't hear it, don't register that anything changed. Then the next from the back. Then the next. You work forward, slow and deliberate, and by the time the lead bird sense something wrong, there's nobody left behind them to sound the alarm. York had been doing this since he was 8 years old. He applied the identical logic to the German machine gun nest. He angled himself where he could see the row of gunners, but they couldn't spot him easily through the trees. Then he started from the back. 1 shot. The last gunner in the line drops. The gunners ahead don't notice. Battle noise swallows everything, and nobody looks behind them when they're taking fire. Then the next one from the rear. Then the next. Clean, methodical, precise. The same cadence he'd used 1,000 times in the Tennessee mountains, except these targets were firing back. German rounds pour at him from every direction, bullets slamming into bark around him, kicking dirt beside his boots. He hears them. He feels the air ripple when they pass close. And York, the man who begged not to be here, who filed twice for conscientious objector status, who feared not death but becoming someone different, stands completely still and keeps shooting. Not because fear left him, but because somewhere in the roar, in the smoke, in the crumpled bodies of his friends on the slope below, the terror of dying shrank smaller than the terror of doing nothing. He fires 28 times. 28 rounds, 28 hits. The machine gun position that killed 6 Americans in 10 seconds falls silent. Then something happens that no one, not York, not his patrol, not a single soul on that hillside, expected. A German officer rises to his feet. His name is Major Woolmer. He has just watched York kill every gunner on his ridge. Now he's coming down himself. Woolmer is no coward. He is no amateur. He's a decorated German officer who has fought on the Western Front for 4 years. He has witnessed horrors that would shatter most men. He has survived artillery storms, gas attacks, infantry waves surging across open terrain. He knows what war looks like from every conceivable angle. What he's watching right now defies comprehension. One man standing exposed under direct fire from an entire machine gun battalion. Not moving, not retreating, just shooting. Calm, methodical, dismantling his position like a man with infinite time and nowhere else on earth to be. Woolmer watches his gunners collapse one after another. He counts them, runs the numbers, studies the angle of fire, trying to make sense of what he's facing. He can't. So he decides to finish it personally. Woolmer stands, draws his pistol, gathers 6 of his best soldiers, and leads them straight down the slope toward York in a bayonet charge. It's a courageous act. It's also the rational one. One man with a rifle cannot stop 7 soldiers rushing him at close quarters. Before he can cycle another round, they'll be on top of him. This is how you neutralize a sniper. You overwhelm him before he reacts. York sees them coming. He sets down his rifle. He draws his pistol. What happens next has an explanation so straightforward that almost no one mentions it. Back in Tennessee, York wasn't just hunting turkeys. He was competing in shooting contests throughout Fentress County. And the most critical skill in those contests isn't precision, it's speed. How quickly can you lock onto a target, squeeze the trigger, and shift to the next? How rapidly can your hands operate while your mind remains still? York had spent years conditioning his hands to outpace his thoughts. Woolmer's men are charging downhill, 7 of them, closing the distance fast. Most soldiers in this moment would lose control, too many bodies moving too quickly at too short a range. Most would fire blind and pray. York doesn't lose control. He begins with the last man. The soldier farthest back in Woolmer's charge drops first, then the one ahead of him, then the one ahead of that. York picks his way forward through the rushing soldiers, exactly as he'd picked through the machine gunners. Methodically, rear to front. Ensuring the men in the lead have no chance to register what's happening behind them. 6 rounds, 6 bodies down in the time it takes an average soldier to pull the trigger twice. Woolmer freezes. He stands alone on the slope. His pistol is spent. 6 of his men lie motionless behind him. Ahead of him, a single American with a pistol leveled at his chest, who has just accomplished something Woolmer's entire military education says cannot happen. Woolmer does something that catches even York off guard. He offers to surrender. Not himself alone. Everyone. The whole position. Every German soldier on that hill. York studies him for a beat. Then he answers with the only German phrase he knows, something a fellow soldier taught him on the road to France because somebody said it could come in handy. "Comrade," he says, "surrender." Woolmer faces his men and gives the command. One by one, the Germans rise, step out from their positions, lay down their weapons, and form a line in the valley below. York counts them as they emerge. 10, 20, 50, 100. He keeps counting. 132. Here is what York said about this moment years later, when people pressed him on how he felt. He said he felt grateful. Not proud, not powerful, not like the hero every newspaper in America was about to call him. Grateful, because every single one of those 132 men was alive. Because Woolmer made the choice he made. Because nobody else had to die that morning. The man who had been terrified of what killing would do to his soul had just survived the most violent 20 minutes of the entire war. And his first emotion when it ended was relief that the killing had stopped. He had honored his deal with God after all, just not in the way he'd imagined. And now he has to bring them back. 132 German prisoners, 7 surviving Americans, and 7 kilometers of enemy ground between them and the American line. York runs the numbers. The captives outnumber his patrol 20 to 1. They are armed. York hadn't had time to collect every weapon. They know this forest far better than he does. They know where the neighboring German positions sit. They know precisely how many Americans are watching them. If they decide to test their luck, York has a serious problem. He solves it the same way he solved everything else that morning. He refuses to give them time to think. York places Woolmer at the head of the column, directly beside him. Close enough that every German soldier trailing behind can see their commanding officer walking shoulder to shoulder with the American. Close enough that Woolmer feels York's presence with every stride. This is deliberate. Woolmer issued the surrender order. As long as Woolmer cooperates, his men will cooperate. Military discipline cuts both directions. The same chain of command that marched them up that hill now keeps them filing obediently behind a Tennessee farmer carrying a rifle. York grasps this instinctively, not from military training, from hunting. You control the lead animal, the herd follows. So he controls Woolmer, and Woolmer controls the rest. They push through the forest without a word. 7 kilometers through ground York has never walked, guided by a map printed in French, navigating on gut instinct and by reading Woolmer's face for the faintest signal that something is wrong. Twice they pass within earshot of other German positions. York feels Woolmer stiffen beside him. Both times he nudges the rifle gently into Woolmer's back. Both times Woolmer stays silent. They keep walking. American lines materialize just before midday. Major Buxton stands at the perimeter, watching figures emerge through the trees. He counts again. The math doesn't add up. York reaches him. Buxton stares at the column stretching back into the forest, then stares at York. He asks the only reasonable question. York, have you captured the whole German army? York pauses. No, sir. Just a few of them. He's promoted to sergeant right there, standing in the mud. Within days, the story detonates. Every newspaper in America, every radio broadcast, every conversation in every diner and barber shop, from Tennessee to California. One man, one morning, 132 prisoners. America has its hero. And Alvin York has a problem he never saw coming. Everybody wants a piece of him. America needed a hero. York just wanted to go home. The reporters found him before the ship touched the dock. Photographers, journalists, anyone with a pen, a camera, and a headline to sell. One man. 132 prisoners. The kind of story that tells itself. York answered their questions politely, said what needed saying, then returned to Tennessee. His neighbors threw a celebration. The whole county showed up. Someone asked what it felt like to stand alone against an entire German battalion. York went quiet for a moment. Quote, _2__, he said. Nobody knew if he meant his patrol or God. Probably both. Hollywood arrived years later, long after the celebrations faded and the papers moved on to fresher heroes. They offered him everything, the rights, the story, his face on posters from coast to coast. More money than York would earn in 10 lifetimes of farming. He said no. They raised the offer. He said no again. Went back to Pall Mall, back to the mountains, back to the farm and the quiet life he nearly lost in a French forest on a Tuesday morning in October. Years later, he finally agreed, not for the money, but because they promised to tell his full story. He took every dollar they paid him and did one thing with it. Built a school in the mountains of Tennessee for kids who grew up the way he did. Poor, isolated, more talent than opportunity. No way out except luck or war. He spent the rest of his life there, teaching, farming, living exactly the life he'd begged to keep when the draft letter arrived. Here is what the newspapers got right. One man, one morning, one of the most extraordinary acts in the history of warfare. Here is what they missed. He did it with trembling hands, against everything he believed, terrified, not of dying, but of becoming someone he wouldn't recognize. And the moment it ended, he walked away from everything it could have given him. Some men go to war and return as heroes. Alvin York went to war a pacifist and came back exactly who he was before. That's the part nobody made a movie about.